T.I. spent years on top of the rap world. The hits, the money, the respect, and a reputation as Atlanta's king of the South. But at 45 years old, the reality of his life looks very different. Family problems, public setbacks, and a series of difficult moments have turned his story into something far more tragic than most people realize. Let me break it down. At the 2026 Grammy Awards, surrounded by the biggest names in the music industry, T looked a reporter from Entertainment Tonight in the eye and said it plainly. Let them know, produced by Pharrell is the first single off of my final album, and then I'm going to be done. They should know it. I've said it before. It's time. No ceremony. No long speech. Just a man putting his flag in the ground and walking away from the only identity he'd held for 2.5 decades. The album is called Kill the King. After a career that helped define Southern hip-hop, T.I. officially announced his 12th and final studio album set to release via Grand Hustle Records and Epic Records. 12 albums over 25 years. And the title he chose to close it all out with isn't a celebration. It's a warning, a reckoning. Because that title didn't come from nowhere. Big Boi cautioned him about the King moniker back when he was coming up. Big Boi said, "It sounds cool. I like it. But understand, when you are king, you put a big bullseye on your back. You can't look for no favors. Life is a game of chess, and the name of the game is called Kill the King." He was young when he heard that. He didn't listen. Now at 45, with the weight of everything that's happened pressing down on him, is naming his farewell after the thing that's been chasing him his entire career. 2 weeks before that Grammy interview, his son, King Harris, was in a rap beef with 50 Cent. And 2 months after it, King was in handcuffs. The 21-year-old was pulled over after officers clocked his camo wrapped Tesla Cybertruck, traveling 70 miles per hour in a 45 miles per hour zone. There was a handgun on the dashboard. Harris was wearing a Pikachu Odyssey when arrested and in his booking photo. The internet went everywhere with it. But T.I. showed up at the scene and the body cam footage captured that too. That footage is something. You see T, a 45-year-old man who has been in and out of his own legal troubles for decades, standing on the side of a Peachtree Corners road in the middle of the night trying to understand how his son ended up in the back of a patrol car. Body cam footage shows the father arriving at the scene and questioning officers about the arrest. Police explained that King was asked to step out of the vehicle because of the visible firearm and refused. The scene is quiet and heavy in a way that's hard to put into words. Heat, 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 heat. There was a handgun on the dashboard. Harris was wearing a Pikachu Odyssey when arrested and in his booking photo. The internet went everywhere with it. But T.I. showed up at the scene and the body cam footage captured that too. That footage is something. You see T, a 45-year-old man who has been in and out of his own legal troubles for decades, standing on the side of a Peachtree Corners road in the middle of the night trying to understand how his son ended up in the back of a patrol car. Body cam footage shows the father arriving at the scene and questioning officers about the arrest. Police explained that King was asked to step out of the vehicle because of the visible firearm and refused. The scene is quiet and heavy in a way that's hard to put into words. This is T's life at 45. A farewell album, a son in custody, a beef with 50 Cent that dragged his entire family into a public war, allegations that have never fully gone away. And still through all of it, T.I. is back on the Billboard Hot 100's Top 40 for the first time in more than a decade, with Let Him Know reaching a new peak of number 38. The man is still making music, still moving, but the architecture of his life, the parts he can't control, keeps shifting underneath him. So, how does a man who once sat at the top of Southern rap end up here? The story doesn't start with a versus beef or a Gwinnett County traffic stop. It starts in Southwest Atlanta in the Bank Headquarters project, where a kid named Clifford Harris was learning the streets the only way available to him by living them. That foundation shaped every decision that came after it. And it's the reason the title King of the South always carried a shadow that the platinum plaques couldn't quite cover. The rap career launched fast and hard. His 2003 debut mixtape Work started building a base in Atlanta. And by the time trap music hit, he had coined a sound. The word trap, that entire genre, that global cultural export, T.I. was at its origin point. He wasn't just rapping about a lifestyle. He was architecting a movement. King was his first No. 1 album on the Billboard 200, selling over 5,220 copies in its first week and cementing his status as a trap pioneer and southern hip-hop icon. But the streets he came from had a hold on him that fame didn't break. The arrests came, the weapons charges came, prison came, and each time he walked back out, there was a version of a comeback. But the version of himself from before the gates closed was never quite the same. That pattern, rise, disruption, return, repeat, became the rhythm of his entire adult life. Just with new characters in the story, including his own children, the retirement announcement itself carries a specific weight that separates it from most. He had been hinting at retirement as far back as 2017 when he appeared on The Breakfast Club and spoke about his plans to leave the music industry. "I'm ready to get the hell out of here, though. I got like 2 once I get them out. I'm done." That was almost a decade ago. The retirement kept getting delayed. The game kept pulling him back. But the 2026 announcement feels different. Among his side ventures is stand-up comedy. His debut special, Cheaper Than Therapy, was released in December 2025 through his own platform. The title of that comedy special is not accidental. A man calling his comedy debut Cheaper Than Therapy is telling you something about what it costs to carry the life he's been carrying. Despite his on-again, off-again retirement, he believes he has plenty more to share with the world and at home. "I think I have many gifts that God has given me that I can spend more time and attention on and spend more time at home with my family and my grandchildren." Tip told ET Grandchildren. That word stops you in your tracks when you really sit with it. T is 45 years old. Is a grandfather. He and Tiny have a total of 7 children between them, 3 of which, King, Major, and Aries, were born to the couple together. They now have grandchildren via Zonique and their son King. King Harris, the same one in the booking photo wearing the Pikachu Odyssey, is a father. And T, the man who built his brand on the trap on the street on the hunger of a kid from Bankhead, is trying to figure out how to close that chapter without losing the ones who carry his name. And through all of it, he kept making music, kept showing up, kept building. He made it clear that retirement from rap doesn't mean retirement from creativity. Kill the King represents the end of one lane, not the end of the brand. That's a crucial distinction. The rap chapter is closing, but the man who built that chapter isn't going anywhere. What makes the retirement announcement land differently in 2026? The allegations, the family drama, the 50 Cent beef, the son's arrest. All of those things are pressing down on the rollout of what should be a clean, triumphant farewell. Instead, the farewell is happening in the middle of a storm, which, if you think about it, is completely consistent with how every major chapter of T's career has unfolded. The storm is never clean. The exits are never quiet. When he was supposed to be celebrating Paper Trail and its Grammy nominations, he was heading into a federal sentencing when he was supposed to be riding the wave of his first post-prison comeback. Probation pulled him back, and now, as he tries to close out his rap career on his own terms with a final album that bears the most honest title he's ever chosen, his family is at the center of a public war that involves diss tracks, body cam footage, and felony charges. The pattern that Big Boy warned him about, the bullseye that comes with the crown, is still very much on his back. And the chapters that make up that pattern are the ones we need to look at closely because they're the chapters that explain why at 45 the life of Clifford Harris is what it is. Starting with a legal history that has functioned for over 2 decades as the defining counterweight to every achievement he's ever earned. One more thing before we move into the specifics. The lead single, Let Him Know, released January 18th, 2026, produced by Pharrell Williams, went platinum and became the first RIAA Gold record of 2026 across genres. The first gold record of the year across all genres. That's not a man whose career is in free fall. That's a man who still has it, who can still connect, who can still make something that cuts through the noise. But the noise he's cutting through is louder than ever. And it's not noise from outsiders. It's noise from within his own life, his own household, his own past, the stuff that the music can't fully contain or resolve. That's the thing about T's story of 45. It's not that he failed. It's that everything he built and everything that built him is now coexisting in a very small space. And something has to give. Kill the King could stand as one of the most intentional closing statements in modern hip-hop. If T.I. truly leaves nothing unsaid, the question is whether the man can actually kill the king he's been for 25 years. And the answer to that question lives in what happens next with his family, with the legal system, with the shadows from 2021 that never fully cleared. We start with the legal history because you can't understand 2026 without understanding 2009. You can't understand the son without understanding the father. And you can't understand why Kill the King hits the way it hits without knowing exactly how much damage wearing that crown has caused over the last 25 years. The weapons case was a hinge point. Everything before it was ascent. Everything after it was navigating the weight of what that conviction put on his record, his image, and his ability to move freely in the industry. It didn't destroy him, but it bent the trajectory of his career in ways that are still visible today. So, let's go back to 2007 hours before a butt performance, a gun sting, and the moment that split the King of the South story into a clear before and after. Federal agents were waiting for T.I. on October 13, 2007. He was supposed to be performing at the Bet Hip Hop Awards in Atlanta that night. Instead, he was sitting in federal custody facing charges that had nothing to do with lyrics or personas. Charges involving actual machine guns and actual silencers, 3 automatic weapons, and 2 silencers purchased through a straw buyer. According to federal prosecutors, the performance never happened. The crown had its first real crack. The case shook the industry in a particular way. At the time, T.I. was at the absolute peak of his powers. Paper Trail was still being recorded. He was the most commercially dominant rapper from the South. And now the authenticity that had made his music resonate. The fact that this wasn't a performance, that the streets he rapped about were real, was playing out in a federal courtroom in the worst possible way. He pleaded guilty. The sentence was reduced significantly, partly because he cooperated with law enforcement to prevent 2 violent incidents, something he's spoken about publicly, that his cooperation saved lives. He ultimately served about 1.5 years of a 3-year sentence across multiple stints, including the 2010 to 2011 return after the probation violation. The details of why he violated probation, a drug incident in Los Angeles, made headlines that competed directly with his music. Every time the rap career tried to breathe, the legal record exhaled harder. What's important to understand about those prison stints isn't just the time lost, it's the momentum lost. In hip-hop, momentum is almost everything. The window for an artist at T's level to dominate the cultural conversation is narrow. You have maybe 3 to 5 years at the absolute peak before the culture starts moving past you. He lost those years or portions of them to federal proceedings, sentencing, and incarceration. When he came back in 2011, the landscape had changed. Not completely. Atlanta was still the engine of Southern rap, and T's influence was still embedded in everything happening there. But the specific moment he'd occupied before the weapons case had closed. No Mercy came out while he was still serving time. Trouble Man in 2012 was solid. But the chart performance, the cultural footprint, nothing hit the way King had hit, the way Paper Trail had hit. He's talked about this with more honesty than most artists would allow themselves. The legal proceedings became a years-long battle of their own. Peterson filed a defamation lawsuit against the couple in early 2021. T and Tiny waited to respond until an appeals court decided what elements of the complaint could proceed to trial. California's Second Appellate District spiked 5 of Peterson's 7 causes of action, leaving only defamation and invasion of privacy. A win for the Harrises on the scoreboard. 5 claims dismissed, but the case itself refused to die. The surviving claims crawled toward trial over the following years. In 2023, a judge ruled that Peterson had to pay the Harris's nearly $97,000 in attorney's fees related to the 5 dismissed claims, But the underlying allegations in Peterson's lawsuit remain at issue. She says she was telling the truth when she stated T held a gun to her head and said, "Bitch, I'll kill you," after she got into an argument with his assistant. That case is still alive, still moving, still generating headlines every time there's a hearing. And then, as of late 2024, the situation got more complicated. Still, a Los Angeles County Superior Court judge agreed to sign an order charging Sabrina Peterson with contempt for not paying over $96.72 in attorney's fees. She was ordered to pay T.I. and Tiny. The judgment stemmed from a prior appeals court ruling that struck down 5 of the 7 causes of action in her lawsuit filed in 2021. If she doesn't appear, the presumption is I'm going to issue a warrant for her arrest. The judge said that's the legal landscape as the final album comes out. That's the backdrop to Kill the King. What the allegations did to T's public standing is harder to quantify than a court ruling. The legal system can dismiss charges. An appeals court can strike causes of action. Prosecutors can decline to file criminal charges as they did in the alleged 2005 Los Angeles incident, citing the statute of limitations. None of that clears the air for the public. None of that erases the memory of 30 women's testimonies being shared on Instagram, on Reddit, in the hip-hop communities that have been discussing T's career for years. The 2021 allegations function as a kind of permanent asterisk. The people who call him a bozo or say the catalog is unlistenable in the post-2021 world, they are responding to something that a legal dismissal doesn't address. They are responding to the feeling that a man who built a brand around protecting his family and loving his wife has a shadow over him that legal proceedings can't fully illuminate in Tiny. That's the part of this that often gets underplayed. TCA Harris is a musician, a businesswoman, a mother of 7. She was co-accused in many of the allegations. Her reality TV franchise was also cancelled. Her reputation was also impacted. She has been dragged into every public battle since, including the 50 Cent beef of 2026, where she became a target for public mocking before her husband and sons fired back. The woman who built a career and a public image independent of T.I. has spent the last several years having that image defined by his controversies. But here's the thing about the 2021 accusations that the courtroom record alone doesn't capture. The timing these allegations arrived at the exact moment T.I. was trying to make his most conscious public pivot. He had been leaning into community activism, speaking about racial justice, building his public profile around being an evolved version of a man who'd been in and out of federal custody. The reformed rapper turned family man turned activist arc was the story he was telling about himself. And then 30 women said something very different. The collision between those two stories, the public redemption narrative and the private accusations, is what made 2021 feel so destabilizing to anyone watching from the outside. Not because one version was definitively true and the other definitively false. That's for courts and evidence to sort out. And those processes are still grinding forward. But because the distance between the two versions was so vast that it forced people to choose which T.I. they were going to believe. Most of his core fan base chose loyalty. Most of his critics chose suspicion. And the people in the middle, the casual listeners, the industry adjacent, the people who'd casually respected him without following his story closely, mostly just stepped back. That middle ground, that broadly positive ambient reputation that most successful artists build over time, took a direct hit in 2021 that hasn't been repaired and may not be repairable. Not because of anything a court has found, but because the sheer volume and specificity of what was alleged shifted the default assumption. That's the shadow that Killed the King is being released into. Not a clean room, not a celebration of a career well-lived, free from controversy. The farewell is happening in the middle of a legal cloud, a reputation question, and a family situation that keeps generating headlines. A rumor emerged from commentator Tasha K alleging that 50 Cent is developing a documentary focusing on alleged drugging and assault accusations connected to T and Tiny. Given 50's track record with the Power franchise and other TV projects, fans find the idea credible, but it remains unconfirmed. If that documentary materializes, the timing would be catastrophic for the album rollout. A 50 Cent produced documentary targeting the Harrises landing around the same period as T's farewell record would dominate the conversation in a way that no amount of Pharrell production can counteract. It would be the beef escalating from diss tracks to something far more permanent. A digital monument to all of the allegations compressed into a streaming-friendly format. And T.I. knows this, which is part of why the 50C beef escalated as fast and as hard as it did, because ignoring it would have been its own statement. When the man who's threatening to expose your family is also trolling your wife with memes and your son is releasing diss tracks targeting his dead mother, the calculation changes. It's not just ego anymore, it's damage control. The question that runs underneath all of this is one that T.I. himself has never fully answered in public. What does accountability look like for him? Not legal accountability. The courts will handle what they handle. But the personal humankind, the kind that his fans have been waiting for and his critics have been demanding since 2021. His made denials. His fought lawsuits. His released music addressing the allegations obliquely. The song What It's Come to released as a single addresses allegations against him and his wife Tiny, who appears in the video alongside him. That kind of artistic response, using the music to speak to the controversy, is very T.I. He's always processed his hardest moments through the music. But the music doesn't answer the questions the accusers are asking. And the legal record, whatever it ultimately shows, doesn't answer the human questions that are quietly hanging over every album rollout. Every Grammy appearance, every body cam video of him showing up to check on his arrested son. The personal reckoning, if it's coming, hasn't fully arrived yet. The beef with 50 Cent didn't start in 2026. That's important to understand. The roots go back to 2006 when both men were operating at the peak of their respective powers. 50 as the dominant commercial force in New York, rap through G-Unit, and T.I. as the ascending king of the South. The beef first began way back in 2006 when both rappers were debatably at their peak. While it never kicked off, there were definite signs of them not liking each other. Two men, two competing crowns, a rap ecosystem that doesn't easily accommodate multiple kings at the same time. They kept it contained for almost 2 decades. Sneak disses in interviews, competitive tension at industry events, the kind of low-level friction that exists between any two dominant figures in the same space. It never exploded into an actual war, and over time, people mostly assumed it had dissolved into the professional courtesy that comes with age and mutual success. Then someone proposed a versus battle, and that's when everything unraveled. Verse, for anyone who needs context, is a platform where artists perform their catalogs side by side. A celebration of music that's being used to settle old tensions and create new cultural moments. Verse was seemingly invented to settle beefs, not start them. The foundation of today's feud was laid during the COVID-19 pandemic when T.I. first floated the idea. A T.I. versus 50 Cent buzz would have been massive. Two of the defining artists of 2000s hip-hop playing their catalogs against each other in front of a live and streaming audience. The cultural event of a certain generation's nostalgia. T.I. says 50 agreed, then 50 backed out. T initially suggested on the $1 Million Worth of Game podcast that the two had agreed on a versus battle with the idea being that Tip would reveal the news. He claimed that 50 went back on the plan, playing dumb when T.I. shared the news. That's the origin of the 2026 version of this war. Not a lyrical provocation, not a sample dispute, not a business conflict, a cancelled plan situation, a felt disrespect. But 50 Cent didn't respond with bars. He responded with memes. That's the specific dynamic that makes this beef feel different from most, because T.I. went to the studio and made music while 50 stayed on his phone and made Instagram posts. As far as rapping goes, this was a totally one-sided feud as T.I. was relentless in stacking 50C diss tracks while 50 opted for social media fodder and trolling instead of heading to the booth. The problem with 50's trolling strategy was that he went after Tiny. That's the line that crossed this from a manageable public spat into something that consumed T's household. 50 Cent and T have been going at it in an online feud where T's wife, Tiny Harris, has been dragged into it. Specifically, 50 posted unflattering images of Tiny using her appearance as a weapon in a conflict between two men. That decision changed the temperature of everything that followed. T.I. responded with 4 diss tracks, not one statement, not one song. T released 4 diss tracks: War, The Right One, Lessons, and What Bully, while his sons, King Harris and Damani Harris, also jumped in. The volume of the musical response sent a clear message. This wasn't casual. This was personal. This was a man defending his wife against public humiliation with every tool available to him. War came first, relatively measured. A warning. T upped the ante with War, where he warns that is not to be trifled with. He raps the bear hibernating. Don't poke him when you see the giant sleeping shouldn't have woke him. It's a threat wrapped in metaphor. Classic T.I. cadence. The measured escalation of a man who wants you to know he's capable of more than this. The Right One was a nuclear option. T.I. went hard on the track, calling 50 a 5-0 dispatcher, branding him a snitch and clowning him as a keyboard warrior who's tough online but no way else. He also rapped that he has paperwork for men in prison. Yame is in him. A bombshell claim that goes straight at 50 Street credibility. That last line is the kind of accusation in hip-hop that you don't just shake off. Paperwork, informant documentation. That's the most damaging thing one rapper can say about another in the cultural framework they both operate in. 50 had spent decades building a persona around surviving being shot 9 times, around street credibility, around the image of a man who doesn't cooperate with law enforcement. Challenging that directly and claiming to have documented evidence was T.I. going for the jugular, not the music output, not the business ventures, the identity. The foundation of who 50 Cent is to his audience. Lessons was next, and it landed differently. T.I. kept the pressure on with his third entry, Lessons, which online commentators and rap critics described as one of his strongest performances in years. Tip sounding genuinely hungry and reinvigorated in the middle of a beef that many people expected him to lose, because 50 Cent is notoriously effective at destroying reputations through trolling. He was actually winning the rap portion. The music was working. What Bully closed out the 4-track salvo. The 4th diss track targeted 50 Cent's online tough guy image versus his apparent reluctance to face real-world consequences. By this point, DJ Academics had drawn direct comparisons to the Drake versus Kendrick Lamar beef, cementing this as one of the defining rivalries of 2026. That comparison to Drake versus Kendrick is significant because that was the last time a rap beef had genuinely moved the culture, had made people stop what they were doing and pay attention. The idea that T.I. versus 50 was hitting those levels said something about how hungry the audience still is for real lyrical confrontation between significant figures. 50 ultimately blinked. 50 waved a metaphorical white flag when removing all posts on his social media pages tied to T.I. and the Harris family. "I'm out of here. You guys hurt my feelings," he wrote alongside a photo of him hopping on a private jet. That's 50 Cent's version of a retreat. Performative, wrapped in irony, but a retreat nonetheless. The memes stopped. The posts about Tiny disappeared, but the Suns were already in motion. King Harris and Damani Harris jumped into the beef independently. And what happened next is one of the more uncomfortable chapters of the entire saga. When 50 posted photos dissing T's wife, their children, King Harris and Damani stepped up to defend their mother while releasing explosive diss tracks targeting 50, making the feud a family affair. That instinct, sons defending their mother, is understandable on a human level, but the way it played out crossed lines that made even T uncomfortable. Damani went the furthest. The most polarizing moment came from Damani Harris, 24, who dropped a nearly 4-minute diss track entitled Miss Jackson, sampling Outkast's iconic 2000 hit, posted to Instagram. The track addresses 50 Cent's late mother directly, opening with the lines, "I want to have a one-on-one convo about the man you sacrificed your life for so the world could see his talent." The track continues with thinly veiled threats, with Damani asking whether she is happy with how her son has been carrying her family name. 50 Cent's mother, Sabrina Jackson, died in a house fire when he was 8 years old. That loss is foundational to 50's public biography. The trauma that made him who he is, targeting it in a diss track directly addressing a dead woman who cannot respond, crossed a line that split the internet right down the middle. Reaction was split. Some praised the boldness, others felt it crossed a line. Either way, it added another incendiary chapter to a beef that refuses to cool down. King Harris matched Omani's energy in a different way. King dropped his own song and video, which features him wearing a t-shirt that features the face of 50's mother, putting a dead woman's face on a t-shirt to wear in a beef video. That's not a lyrical flex. That's a provocation designed purely to cause pain. And it worked in the sense that it kept the story alive and the culture talking. But it also raised very immediate questions about what was happening inside the Harris household during all of this. T's response to the son's involvement tells you everything about the position he was in. While T appreciated his family justifiably jumping in to defend their mother, he didn't particularly like it. "No, I don't enjoy it." He said he went to the Ebro Laura Rosenberg show and talked about trying to pull King back from going too far, describing it as trying to get him off the ledge. But the tracks were already out. The videos were already up. The moment had already happened. What does it mean when a father tries to pull his son off a ledge? He himself set up. T made the diss tracks. T escalated the beef past the point where it could be contained privately. His sons watched their father do that, and they responded the only way they knew how. The way they'd been raised to respond to threats. Against the family, with aggression, with music, with public confrontation. The apple in this case did not fall far from the tree. And that's the layer of the beef that nobody was really saying out loud while it was happening. The 50 Cent situation was never really about theirs. It was about the accumulated tension of being a man who has spent 25 years in a culture that demands a specific kind of toughness and who has passed that demand consciously or unconsciously down to his children. King Harris has his own legal history that mirrors his father's in uncomfortable ways. Before the April 2026 Cybertruck arrest, there was a 2023 incident at an Atlanta Falcons game where he got into a public argument with his father on Instagram Live. The subject of the argument was the very nature of his upbringing. King disputing the family man who taught his kids right image, claiming his grandmother raised him more than T.I. did during those prison years. That argument aired publicly at a stadium was one of the rawest moments of family dysfunction the T.I. brand has ever produced. It was also looking back a preview. A young man who felt abandoned by his father during those formative years, who grew up in the shadow of a famous and frequently absent parent, who watched that parent come home from prison and immediately tried to reconstruct authority. That young man was always going to have things to say, and some of those things were going to come out in ways that T couldn't control or script. The 50 Cent beef was in a way the container in which all of that tension became visible. King defending his mother was genuine. King going after 50's dead mother was something else. The behavior of someone who has been taught that when family is attacked, you go for maximum damage. That lesson was modeled for him. The question of where the lesson came from doesn't require much investigation. Meanwhile, T had spoken out for the first time since releasing the diss tracks. He expressed how he didn't want to engage but couldn't not defend his family. That tension between knowing the right move and making a different one has defined T's decision-making throughout his adult life. Knowing he shouldn't have purchased those weapons in 2007, but doing it anyway. Knowing that prison time would cost him momentum, but making the choices that led there. Knowing his sons were escalating past what he could endorse, but having already set the escalation in motion. The self-awareness is real. The pattern continues anyway. That gap between knowing better and doing differently is the most human thing about T's story. And it's the most painful thing about it, too. The beef cooled on the surface. 50 deleted his posts. T said he'd moved on. The Sun stopped dropping tracks for now, but the infrastructure of the conflict is still standing. The alleged 50 Cent documentary, the lingering court cases, the body cam footage of T at his son's arrest that dropped weeks after he declared peace. The internet never fully archives. Away from a man like T, every new incident pulls the old ones back out. And through all of it, the music kept coming. T is back in the Billboard Hot 100's top 40 for the first time in more than a decade, with Let Him Know reaching a new peak of number 38. The beef, whatever damage it did to his public standing with certain audiences, also put his name back in the conversation at a volume it hadn't occupied in years. 50 Cent's troll strategy may have backfired in the sense that it gave T a legitimate target and a legitimate reason to start rapping like a man with something to prove. The final album is benefiting from the beef. The attention, that lessons, and what Bully generated fed directly into the anticipation for Kill the King. People who hadn't been paying attention to T's music in years went back and listened to those diss tracks and were reminded of who he actually is as a rapper. Technically proficient, lyrically sharp, capable of writing bars that have real targets. That's the T.I. who made Paper Trail. That's the T.I. who on his best day can stand in a room with anyone in hip-hop. The question the beef raised and left partially unanswered is what happens to the sons. King and Domani are both making music now. They were opening acts on the Family Succession tour T.I. launched to support the final album. To celebrate the album and pass the crown, T.I. launched a multi-generational family tour with sons Domani and King Harris as special guests and openers. It's a rare multi-generational family event that's genuinely moving if you think about it from the right angle. A father closing his rap career on a stage shared with his sons, passing the creative torch in the most public way possible, acknowledging that the legacy isn't just about albums and chart positions. It's about what the next generation does with what they've been given. But King's April 2026 arrest complicates the narrative of that tour. He's facing felony drug possession charges. The tour has him as a featured performer. The body cam footage of his father arriving at the scene of his arrest is still circulating on the internet. The questions about whether the son is actually in a good place to receive and carry the torch are live and present in every conversation about the succession narrative. The night of April 12, 2026, started somewhere in Tokyo. King Harris, 21 years old, aspiring rapper, son of one of the most documented figures in hip-hop history, had apparently just returned from a trip to Japan. He would later post on Instagram, living a good Pikachu life in Tokyo, then come back to ATL and Team Rocket catch me with a master ball and throw me in jail all night. That captioned, jokey, irreverent, designed for social media engagement, is the kind of thing a 21-year-old posts when he wants to make a bad night into content. But what happened between Tokyo and that Instagram post was the kind of night that doesn't fully resolve with a caption. Gett County, Georgia, early Sunday morning, an officer spotted Harris camo-wrapped Tesla Cybert truck speeding near Holcomb Bridge Road and Peachtree Corner Circle. The officer had to reach speeds of 80 mile power up. 80 mile at 80 mile. 80 of the off to the off the R to the heat. Heat, 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 heat up hey. Heat, 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 heat. Heat, 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 heat. Laughter. Body camera footage shows the officer telling Harris he was absolutely flying down the road. A camel-wrapped Cybertruck flying through the suburban Atlanta night at well past the speed limit. That's not inconspicuous. That's not the behavior of someone trying to avoid attention. When the car stopped, the situation escalated immediately. Once stopped, officers noticed a firearm on the dashboard and an open THC container in the center console. Harris initially refused to exit the vehicle, leading to a tense standoff, where he was warned he would be arrested for obstruction. He eventually complied after speaking with his lawyer on the phone. The image of a 21-year-old sitting in a Pikachu costume in a stopped Cybert truck, refusing to exit the vehicle, calling his lawyer while officers explain that there's a gun visible on the dashboard. That image contains entire chapters. The charges that followed were serious. Jail records show Harris was arrested and booked on a felony drug possession charge, misdemeanor obstruction of law enforcement, and speeding and seatbelt violations. Police also discovered a THC vape pen containing 10 milligrams of THC, which resulted in the felony possession charge. And then while police identified a pill found on Harris at the jail as oxycodone, it's not yet clear if he has a legal prescription for the substance speeding. A visible gun on the dashboard. A THC container opened in the console. Oxycodone on his person at booking. That's not a minor incident. T arrived at the scene. The body cam footage of that arrival. A father showing up in the middle of the night to the roadside where his son is sitting in the back of a patrol car is genuinely hard to watch if you've been paying attention to the full arc of this family story. His father arrived at the scene and was briefed by the arresting officer. T questioned the officers. He wanted to understand what happened, what the charges were, whether there was anything to be done. There wasn't. His son was going to jail. King Harris was booked at 2:32 a.m. and released on bond shortly after 8 a.m. on the same day. A few hours in a holding cell, but the felony charge doesn't go away with the bond. Harris is expected to face both traffic and felony drug charges in Gwinnett County Court. That court date is coming, and the outcome of that proceeding will shape the next chapter of King Harris's life in ways that a Pikachu caption on Instagram can't deflect. The booking photo went everywhere. The arrest became viral online when a booking photo emerged showing Harris wearing a Pikachu onesie. The internet did what the internet does. Memes, commentary, takes, counter-takes. Counter-takes. Some people found it funny, some found it sad, some found it infuriating. And somewhere in the middle of all of that noise was a 45-year-old man. T seeing his son's face in a Pikachu costume circulating across every platform he's ever used to promote his own career. The parallel to T's own early legal history is the part nobody can look away from. The weapons, the probation violations, the multiple stints behind bars during the years when his children were young and needed him home. Now his son, who was one of those young children, who publicly said in 2023 that his grandmother raised him more than his father did during those years, is facing his own felony charge. The cycle that T.I. has been publicly committed to breaking is visibly, measurably running again in the next generation. It would be reductive to blame T.I. entirely for King's choices. King is 21 years old. He's an adult making adult decisions. But the environment in which those decisions are being made, the cultural context, the behavioral templates, the specific messages about what toughness looks like, and how conflict gets handled, those things came from somewhere. And the family history, the prison absences during formative years, the public positioning of the Harris household as aspirational street royalty, all of that is part of the environment. The 2023 Falcons game incident was the first time the public got a window into what the relationship between T and King actually looks like beneath the family brand. An argument on Instagram lived at a stadium where King disputed the narrative of his upbringing. He pushed back on the silver spoon framing, the idea that growing up as T's son meant growing up with everything. His argument was essentially that the man most responsible for building the T.I. family brand was not always present during the years when a father's presence matters most. That's not a small thing to say publicly. That's a son telling the world that the family man image his father has been selling is incomplete. That the reality show version of the Harris household, warm, chaotic, loving, functional in its own way, left out the years when there was no father in the house because the father was incarcerated. Those are the years King was growing up. Those are the years that shape a person. T's response to that moment was controlled. He didn't deny it. He didn't escalate publicly. He framed it as normal family stuff, as something that gets worked out privately. But the moment was out there, and combined with everything that came before it and after it, the beef involvement, the April 2026 arrest, the felony charge, it builds a picture of a young man who is carrying something heavy that has no clean resolution. Domani is the other son in this story, and his trajectory is a useful contrast. At 24, he's been more consistently focused on music, building his craft, working within the industry. He got pulled into the 50 Cent beef. The Miss Jackson track was his, and that track was polarizing enough to generate significant coverage. But before and after that moment, Domani has largely kept a lower profile than King, stayed out of legal trouble, and seemed to be handling the weight of the name differently. That difference matters because it pushes back against any simple narrative about the Harris household. It's not that T's children are uniformly struggling or uniformly succeeding. Zonique Tiny's daughter from before her relationship with T.I. built her own career in entertainment. Deja T's daughter became known publicly partly because of her father's deeply controversial 2019 comments about accompanying her to gynecological appointments to verify her virginity. Comments that generated enormous backlash and raised serious questions about controlling behavior. But she's also been building her own public presence. The 7 children of this household are navigating their inheritances differently. King's situation is the most visible and most concerning because the parallels to his father's early history are so direct. Speed and controlled substances, a gun in the car, refusing to comply with police. These are not random facts. These are biographical patterns. and the fact that T himself came from this same pattern, that he built an empire partly on the authenticity of having lived exactly this makes the current moment feel like the story has come full circle in a way that no one in the family could be happy about. They're the moment in the body cam footage that captures everything without saying a word. T standing on that roadside in Gwinnett County at 2 a.m. and being briefed by the officer about what his son did, what was found in the car, what the charges are. He's not performing for a camera the way he performs on a stage or in an interview. He's just a father at 2 a.m. being told that the thing he feared, the thing he has spent years saying he wanted to protect his children from has happened anyway. He couldn't stop it. That's the part that has to sit with him. He built an empire. He survived federal prosecution. He made millions. He built a label. He made a reality TV show that was specifically designed to show the world that he was a different man from the one who bought those weapons in 2007. He told his kids through word and through example what not to do. And at 2 a.m. on a Gwinnett County roadside, it didn't matter. The kid was in the back of the patrol car wearing a Pikachu Odyssey. The helplessness of that moment is more honest than any Grammy interview, more honest than any diss track, more honest than the carefully constructed narrative of King of the South turns family patriarch turns retiring legend. This is the raw material underneath all of it. A man who could not protect his son from the version of himself he was desperately trying to escape. King's arrest came barely a month after the 50 Cent beef had seemingly cooled. In the weeks between those two events, the beef dying down, and the Cybit truck stop, the family succession tour was being organized, the farewell album was being promoted. T was doing interviews about his legacy, about his grandchildren, about spending more time at home. The narrative arc of the retirement was being constructed, and then the body cam footage dropped and all the interviews about grandchildren and legacy and healing cycles collided with footage of T's son arguing with police from the back of a squad car asking, "Did it make you feel tough?" The question King asked the officers, aggressive, defiant, the behavior of someone who thinks the rules don't fully apply to him, is a recognizable posture to anyone who has followed T's own legal history. The defiance is familiar. The entitlement to a different outcome is familiar. The shock that consequences are actually landing is familiar. It's generational, not genetically determined. Behavior isn't genetic, but transmitted, passed down through the specific environment of growing up in this family, in this city with this history and this name. T's response to the arrest was not the response of a man who was surprised. He showed up. He questioned the officers in a way that was controlled, but clearly tense. He did not make a scene that made things wise. But the body cam footage also showed a man who understood that he was standing in the middle of a story he'd lived before. Just from the other side of the handcuffs, the tour continued. King is still listed as a feature performer and opener. The music is still happening. The family is still publicly presenting as a unit moving forward together. But the felony charge hangs over the succession narrative in a way that a booking photo and an Instagram joke can't erase. King Harris will now have to address the traffic violations and the felony drug possession charge in court. That court proceeding is the next chapter of this story. And what happens that will say something important about the legal system's treatment of celebrity-adjacent defendants, about King's actual trajectory, and about whether the cycle that T.I. has been trying to break is closer to breaking or closer to completing itself. The story of this family has always been a story about what survives. What survives prison time? What survives scandal? What survives the internet? What survives the gap between the public image and the private reality? And increasingly, the question that matters most is what survives into the next generation. King has talent that's worth saying clearly. The diss tracks he dropped during the 50C beef, flawed as the content was, showed genuine fire, genuine presence, genuine hunger. He didn't sound like a famous man's son trying to coast on a name. He sounded like someone who actually wants to be in this industry on his own terms, who has something to say, who can deliver it. That's not nothing. But talent and circumstance are two different things. And right now, the circumstances surrounding King Harris are the kind that have derailed careers before they got started. Legal issues create distraction. They create financial pressure. They create a public narrative that in the age of instant search attaches itself to your name permanently. Every booking photo follows you. T.I. knows this better than anyone on earth. He has lived it in multiple iterations. He knows exactly what it costs to have your name associated with a police booking at a formative moment in your career. He knows what it does to your options, your deals, your momentum, your relationship with the industry, people who control those opportunities. And he's standing there at 2 a.m. in Gwinnett County knowing all of that, watching it happen again, not to himself this time, to his son. That's the part of T's life at 45 that no diss track can process and no Grammy interview can paper over. Some things just have to be felt. The title of the final album is doing a lot of work. Kill the King. On the surface, it's a declaration. The last King of the South album, closing out the era that defined him. But beneath that surface, if you've been paying attention to everything that's happened over the last 5 years, the title reads differently. It reads like a man who has looked at the version of himself that he built, the crown, the swagger, the impenetrability, and decided that keeping it alive is costing too much. What it costs to be the King of the South in 2026 is different from what it cost in 2006. In 2006, the cost was ambition and hustle and street credibility. In 2026, the cost is your son in handcuffs, your wife in memes, your past in court, and your legacy in the hands of a culture that will decide without your input what it means. T, long known as the self-proclaimed King of the South, is choosing to symbolically end that era on his own terms. According to him, the album is meant to leave nothing unsaid, a final reflection, declaration, and possible reckoning. Leave nothing unsaid. That phrase is the most significant thing connected to this album's rollout because everything T.I. has left unsaid over the last 25 years. The full truth of the legal history, the full truth of the family strain, the full truth of what the allegations of 2021 did to him and to Tiny and to how they see themselves. All of that is floating around this farewell. The question is whether Kill the King is the place where some of it finally gets said, or whether it's the place where the persona gets a formal burial without the man beneath it ever fully speaking. The musical evidence so far suggests T.I. is not going quietly. Let Him Know released January 18th, 2026. Produced by Pharrell Williams. Went platinum and became the first RAA Gold record of 2026 across genres. A platinum single in 2026 from a man who many people had written off as a relic of a pre-streaming era. That's not a victory lap. That's a revival. The Pharrell collaboration is a statement in itself. Pharrell doesn't work with artists who are limping to the finish line. He works with people who are operating at a level of confidence and clarity that produces great music. His involvement with Let Him Know signals that there is genuine creative heat behind this album, that it's not an obligation or contractual necessity, but an actual musical statement from someone with something to prove. And then there's Dr. Dre Kill the King Has Been, described as T's final statement as a recording artist. The project will showcase his evolution while honoring the foundation he built over his career. With Dr. Dre's production expertise now part of the equation, the album has the potential to be a career-defining work. Pharrell and Dr. Dre on the same album. Those aren't names that attach themselves to projects built around nostalgia. Those names attach themselves to projects built around the present tense of excellence. The farewell tour frames the album in a specific way. Kill the King arrives on the 20th anniversary of his classic King. He is hosting a major Atlanta celebration on May 13th, 2026, marking the 20th anniversary of both King and ATL. 20 years between King and Kill the King. That's a span of time that contains everything. The prison time, the reality TV, the beefs, the allegations, the family building, the family fractures. 20 years of carrying a crown that Big Boy told him puts a target on your back. The anniversary framing is deliberate and considered. King was the album that cemented his status. The first no one on the Billboard 200. The 500,000 first-week copies. The cultural moment that made King of the South stick as more than just a self-granted title. Closing the career on the 20th anniversary of that album says, I know what I built. I know when I built it, and I'm choosing to close the circle here on purpose, on my terms. That intentionality is one of the more dignified aspects of a career that has often been defined by things happening to T.I. Rather than being chosen by him, prison wasn't a choice. The probation violation wasn't a plan. The allegations arrived unasked for. Whatever the truth of them turns out to be, the 50-cent beef escalated past the level he wanted it to. His son's arrest wasn't controllable. But the timing of this farewell, the anniversary, the final album, the succession tour, that's a man taking hold of his own story and deciding how it ends. The title also has a predecessor conversation attached to it. When Big Boi gave T.I. that warning years ago, the name of the game is called Kill the King. That's what you are setting yourself up for. The warning was about external threats, about the people who come for you when you crown yourself, about the industry, the streets, the critics, the rivals, all the forces that target anyone foolish enough to declare themselves royalty. But the thing that almost killed this particular king wasn't external. It was the interior stuff. The choices made from inside the persona. The decision to buy those weapons in 2007. The decision to violate probation. The decisions alleged and denied that produced the 2021 accusations. The decision to escalate the 50-cent beef to the point where his sons were writing diss tracks about a dead woman. The thing that almost killed the king was the king himself. That's the most honest reading of Kill the King as a title. Not the outside world tried to take me down, but I be my own biggest threat. And I'm choosing to acknowledge that by naming my final album after the act of ending the thing that has both made me and cost me everything. Whether T.I. will say that explicitly in the album's lyrics is the musical question of the year. Whether the music lives up to the title's potential is something only the completed album can answer. The legacy question is genuinely complicated. In one column, you have coordinator of trap music, a genre that has reshaped global popular culture. Multiple platinum albums across a 25-year career, a Billboard Hot 100 Top 40 entry in 2026, over a decade after his commercial peak, a successful label in Grand Hustle, an acting career that included the Marvel Cinematic Universe, a reality TV franchise, a long marriage that survived things most relationships don't. In another column, you have multiple federal convictions and prison stints. Ongoing legal proceedings stemming from 2021 allegations that involve over 30 women. A reality TV franchise that was canceled by the network in the aftermath of those allegations. A son facing felony drug charges. A public beef that dragged in his wife and children and resulted in diss tracks targeting a dead woman. A reputation that is permanently divided. Both columns are real. Neither cancels the other. That's what makes the legacy genuinely complicated rather than simply tragic or simply triumphant. T built something real. He also damaged things that can't be fully repaired. The culture gets to decide how it weighs those two truths against each other, and it's going to weigh them differently depending on who in the culture you're asking. The community that has followed him from the beginning. Atlanta, the Southern hip-hop audience, the people who were in their teens and 20s when trap music first came out. That community tends to hold both columns at once. The appreciation for what he built doesn't require pretending the second column doesn't exist. It coexists with it uncomfortably and honestly. The broader internet, the audience that came to T's story through the allegations or the 50-cent beef or King's arrest tends to weight the second column more heavily. For them, the legacy is primarily defined by the controversies, the gun sting, the rape accusations, the body cam footage. The music is secondary, if it registers at all. And then there are the people for whom T.I. has always been a cautionary tale. Not a tragedy, but a specific kind of American story about what happens when extraordinary talent and deep personal instability occupy the same body for 25 years. The story of a man who was genuinely gifted, who built genuinely significant things, who made choices that kept undermining those things, who reached 45 and announced his retirement while his son sat in the back of a police car in a Pikachu costume. What comes after Kill the King is a question T has answered in part. Comedy, family, acting, more time with grandchildren, the possibility of not waking up every morning and being first and foremost a rapper, a persona with its specific demands and its specific costs. The debut comedy special, Cheaper Than Therapy, was released in December 2025. That title again is doing enormous work, cheaper than therapy. The implication being that the performance, the stage, the act of turning your pain into material for one audience is doing some of the work that a therapist might otherwise do. That T.I. has been processing his life through art for so long that the art itself has become the treatment. Whether that's a healthy approach to the accumulated weight of his specific biography is above the pay grade of a YouTube script. But it's worth noting. He told Entertainment Tonight, "I think I have many gifts that God has given me that I can spend more time and attention on and spend more time at home with my family and my grandchildren." There's a quietness to that statement that feels real, not performed, not a brand message. A man who has been louder than almost anyone in his industry for a quarter century, saying that he wants to be quieter now, that he wants to be present in a way that the King of the South persona didn't fully allow. The grandchildren are a thread worth pulling. He and Tiny now have grandchildren via Zonique and their son King. King Harris, the same man with the felony drug charge and the Pikachu booking photo, is also a father. There's a child in this story now who is King's, who is T's grandchild, who will grow up in whatever environment that household creates going forward. That child is the reason the Kill the King moment matters beyond the music. It's not just about closing a rap chapter. It's about whether the man who closes it is going to be different enough in his choices, in his presence, in what he models to change what gets passed down again. The cycle that T didn't receive from his own father. The cycle that he partially reproduced for King. The cycle that is now one generation further along. That's the real reckoning that Kill the King is pointing toward, whether the album fully delivers on it or not. The question of what gets transmitted, what breaks, what heals, what the next generation of this family carries that isn't a bullseye. The 50C beef has a final chapter that's worth revisiting at this point in the story. T told TMZ, "Man, that's so last week, man. The only thing I have to say, it's very unfortunate, but honestly, I wasn't here to defeat. I was here to defend that framing. I was here to defend, not to defeat," is one of the more revealing things T has said about himself in years, because defeating 50 Cent was never the actual objective. The objective was making clear to anyone watching that the Harris family, Tiny specifically, would not absorb public humiliation without consequence. The defense worked. Technically, 50 deleted the posts. The memes stopped. The public scoring of the beef, such as it was, went to T.I. on the lyrical dimension, while 50 won the troll dimension. But the defense came at a cost. The son's involvement, the dead mother diss tracks, the reactivation of every 2021 allegation in public commentary, and the general atmosphere of chaos that surrounded the rollout of a farewell album that deserved a calmer entry into the world. Speaking on the Ebro Laura Rosenberg podcast, T.I. shared more about his thinking, saying, "I'm real big on treating other people the way I want to be treated. And I'm also real big on treating mothers the thing way they decided they're going to treat me." That tension between the man who wants to operate with dignity and the man who responds with maximum force is T's central conflict condensed into one quote. It's the same tension that produced the weapons purchase in 2007. The same tension that produced 4 diss tracks in 2026. The same tension that King Harris may have inherited from his father and that is currently playing out in a Winnet County courtroom. So, what is T's life at 45? It's a man standing at the intersection of everything he built and everything he broke. It's a platinum single and a felony charge for his son. It's a farewell album with Pharrell and Dr. Dre and a reality TV show that got cancelled in the middle of his peak brand moment. It's a marriage that outlasted scandals that have ended careers. And it's an allegation cloud that still hasn't fully cleared. It's 4 diss tracks that reminded everyone why he mattered and a body cam video that reminded everyone of how much he hasn't changed. The tragedy, if that word applies, isn't that T failed. He didn't fail. He achieved things that most people, most rappers, most kids from Bankhead courts, most people who've been inside a federal facility don't achieve. The tragedy, if it's there, is the gap between what was possible and what was realized. The career that could have been uninterrupted, the family that could have been less publicly fractured, the legacy that could have been cleaner. But clean legacies are for people who played it safe. He never played it safe. Not in the trap, not in the music, not in the marriage, not in the business, not in the beef. He went all the way in on every single thing he ever did. And the all-the-waying approach produced both the crown and the bullseye. It produced both paper trail and the weapons conviction. It produced both a 7-child family that has stayed together across extraordinary strain, and a son whose booking photo is circulating on every platform. The final album carries the weight of all of that, and the title is the most honest thing Clifford Harris has ever put on a piece of music. Kill the King. Not a victory declaration, not a retirement party, a reckoning, an acknowledgement that the persona he built has been both his greatest achievement and his most expensive liability, that it needs to die for something else, something quieter, something more present, something that can actually be a grandfather without also being the king of the South to survive. T confirmed at the 2026 Grammy Awards that Kill the King will be his final album. After retiring from music, he will pursue comedy, family life, and other ventures. Comedy, family, other ventures, the life after the crown. It's a smaller sounding list than King of the South, but it might be a richer one. The question of whether Clifford Harris, not T, not the king, not the persona, can actually inhabit that quieter life is the question his next chapter will answer, and his son's next chapter, and his grandchildren's next chapter. The story doesn't end with the album. The album is just the album. The story continues in the choices being made right now in courtrooms and recording studios and hospital waiting rooms and late nights when a phone rings and a father's name comes up on a police report. That's the life at 45. That's the weight of the crown, and that's what the man on the album cover, whoever killed the king reveals him to be when it's finally complete, is going to have to live with and through it.